Hello everybody and welcome to my channel. My name is Twizzy and today I'm actually starting what I hope to be a new series. Maybe not if I'm a little bit lazy and give up like I usually do with things, but no, I'm not going to put that energy out there. This series is called Black and British and it's about film that is black and British, because I feel like with movies to do with racism and to do with movies that are pro-black always seem to be American and from the US. I mean, obviously, don't get me wrong, there are some amazing ones like Beale Street Could Talk, Black Klansman, Selma. Obviously there's amazing movies out there, but I think it's really good to reflect on our own culture as British people, black and British people, and the films that kind of shaped black and British culture throughout the years. So this is what this series is. It's looking at films from the UK that are about black stories and by black directors. So I found this really good list of black and British movies from a really old BFI article, which I will link below if you want to watch any of the movies, because I'm probably going to watch them in my series if you want to kind of watch them in advance, if you're watching along, whatever. But the first one that I've decided to watch was Burning an Illusion. Burning an Illusion is a movie from 1981 and it is directed by Menelik Shabazz. Sorry if my pronunciation is wrong on that. And what drew me to Burning an Illusion is the little photo they had in this BFI article, which showed a black woman in front of the Charing Cross kind of like tube station sign. So I was like, oh, this is like really local. This is literally London. And then I looked a bit more into the movie, and it's really interesting because the places that they shot the movie are kind of close to me, like, well, closer than I've ever seen, you know, black stories told on the screen before. So they were filmed around Notting Hill and Ladbroke Grove, which is obviously really close. So that really drew me in. And also I was kind of like reading through the Wikipedia article about the movie, and it said that this is one of the first British movies that actually focused on a black woman, which I find so mind-blowing. And another mind-blowing fact is that this is the second ever British feature by a black director, and this was in 1981. It's the second ever British feature by a black director. That just absolutely blows my mind. The first one is Pressure by Horace Ove, and we will be looking at that. I think it's probably the film I'm going to watch next. But yeah, this film is definitely kind of a landmark one when it comes to black and British filmmaking. So let's just get straight into it. Burning an Illusion is a story about a black woman named Pat who lives in London, who is kind of stuck at a point in her life. Like, she has goals but not really any ambition. She is very independent and she has her own flat and works full time, but she doesn't really chase like a higher thing, like a dream. She just kind of looks for material or superficial things, like she wants to get married and settle down and have a partner rather than having like an actual life goal. The film opens with Pat at a party and she meets a guy named Del, who she isn't completely into, but they basically end up getting to a relationship. And it's one of those ones where, you know, you're kind of not 100% into the relationship at the start, but it gets to a point where it's been so long that you're just together and you're kind of stuck there. I think that's the kind of relationship Del and Pat have. Del and Pat are two completely different people. Pat wants to settle down, she's a hard worker, she pays for the flat that they live in, whereas Del is kind of a bum. He lives in her house basically rent-free and avoids any sort of responsibility. Like, he won't even give her a straight answer on where the relationship is going when she asks. He's just like, oh, ask me again in a few months. Like, he's the complete opposite to her, really. But that is definitely not the only difference between Pat and Del. It's really easy to tell from the start that Del is somewhat more in touch with his culture than Pat is. He has quite a thick, like, Caribbean accent and is more in tune to microaggressions in his workplace, for example. Like, he mentions that the white manager he has at work always looks at him differently to the other like white employees, and he feels like he's harder on him. And when he brings his stuff up to Pat, she kind of brushes it off and ignores it. So this kind of dynamic goes on for quite a bit of the ways through the film. They break up, get back together, they're very different people. Pat gets kind of annoyed with him, but she doesn't really like conflict. She's quite quiet, so she doesn't want to say anything. And also Del can get physically aggressive with her as well, which is something that did not age well at all in this movie. That is one thing that, because near the end of the movie you're kind of meant to be rooting for their relationship, but then you're thinking like, oh wait, but didn't he hit her? So that, yeah, that didn't age well. It's only when Del gets involved in a stabbing and is arrested that Pat begins to kind of wake up to racism in her own world. She becomes a part of a group that vouches for the rights of black prisoners and begins reading very informative books on racism like Malcolm X and other literature. And then by the end of the film, Pat has become a lot more aligned with Dell. She takes on a similar Caribbean accent to him, wears more traditional clothing, and starts to wear her hair naturally. One of my favourite things about Burning an Illusion is the way the story is crafted to kind of set up Pat in a certain way and then completely go like a full 180 by the end of the film. Initially it seems as though this is just like a drama, romance, comedy about a black woman, which first of all is something we hardly ever see. It seems like we never really see black women just living normal lives, like they're always the victim or like a villain or someone who needs saving. It's never just, you know, like when we see in white Western films, just a woman, oh, she's got a boyfriend, she's got a job, blah, blah, blah. We never really see that with black women. So first of all, I really love that aspect of the film. Being able to see a black woman on screen going through the struggles of love and work and relationships as everyone else does, it just feels really good and different. I can admit that the focus on Pat's day-to-day can get a little bit boring at the start of the film. Like, it's nice to see her friends at different parts and there is like a bit of comedy to it, but it gets a little bit repetitive for my liking. But once you stick with it, it's a really nice payoff by the end. We see Pat becoming involved in activism, and you can see that she's kind of waking up to the racist culture she lives in, and I think that it's somewhat reminiscent of what we're going through today with the BLM movement. With an incredibly fast and forever changing newsfeed and the short attention span that social media cultivates, we only seem to wake up to activism when a tragic event like the murder of George Floyd happens. These aren't isolated events, BAME people are killed every day, yet we only seem to be activists about it when the stories get a load of coverage and spark a fire on social media. And I think Pat kind of experiences a similar thing in Burning an Illusion. It's when Dell is facing trial that she starts to realise the corruption of her kind of neat and perfect world that she's confined to. The only difference I would say is by the end of Burning an Illusion, you do feel like Pat has been permanently changed, which I think is a lot different to the kind of temporary effect these movements have on social media. I think it's safe to say that the structure of the film makes the end feel like a beginning. The film ends with Pat and a group of her friends all in traditional clothing singing a song on a bus. You don't really know where they're going, you kind of expect that it's going to be a protest or something to do with black activism, and it doesn't feel like, oh, this is a close to the film, everything's been solved. It feels like it's just opened up a can of worms. There's so much more in Pat's life going on, it's just a beginning because she's changed into a new person. So I think although it is kind of difficult to trudge through the day-to-day of Pat's life and her relationship with Dell in Acts 1 and 2, it really does pay off by Act 3, where you feel there has been a real transformation in the character. And I can only hope that the BLM movement and other movements have led to some people transforming just like Pat has. For me, the film also specifically touched me as a British person. Much like Pat was kind of blinded early on in the film, it sometimes feels like we forget that racism even exists in the UK just because people aren't getting shot. Racism still exists in the UK as strongly as it does in the US, however we're just more implicit about it. It's less of a police officer could shoot me and more of a police officer could randomly stop and search me. I think for me I just identified with Pat because she's clearly like an introverted person who doesn't like conflict, and she's kind of been pretending that racism doesn't exist because doing so makes her world simpler and easier to live in. And I guess it shows that sometimes the path to freedom and the path to an equal world is, you know, it's going to be the harder one to take, but doing it will make everyone a lot better off. Other than the relevance that Burning an Illusion has to those who are British, the soundtrack is another amazing reason to watch this movie. It has some great reggae tracks on it that just totally fit the vibe of the film. Some great Janet Kay songs in there. So yeah, definitely recommend listening to the soundtrack if you're not going to watch the movie. In conclusion, I just have a really big love for this movie. It kind of feels nostalgic in a way, just watching it. I think it's like, I grew up, my dad's side of my family is Jamaican, and so hearing all the accents and like the little colloquialisms in the speech of like Jamaican people is just really comforting to me. And also seeing London, like tube stations and like iconic places in London like Notting Hill, they have a whole sequence which is during Notting Hill Carnival, I think, which is really nice. So seeing those things and hearing those voices just feels really comforting and warm to me. So this is definitely a movie that is gonna make you feel good, even though there is sadness and arguments in it. By the end of it, you do feel good and you do feel quite like, I don't know, like you want to change, just like Pat has, and make a change. So I 100% recommend it. You can stream it on the BFI player, or you can subscribe to the BFI channel on Amazon Prime and watch it through there. Whatever you want to do. Make sure to subscribe so you can watch my next video, which will hopefully be a similar kind of review of Pressure by Horace Ove. Really excited to cover that. You can follow me on social media if you would like, at Isabella Tomo on Twitter. And yeah, I'll see you guys later.